All right, guys, good morning and welcome back. Glad to see you. So at the end of the first video that I did, or somewhere during that first video, I had mentioned that I was going to be changing the water pumps in both of the lower units on my F150s. And I've already done that job. I had some video that I did take of it. I don't have a cameraman, so I was operating the camera off of a fixed location, and the results were, well, I'm still debating on how that turned out. I've got some editing to do just to sort of put it all together and make that whole process much shorter from a video standpoint, especially posting something on YouTube. But what I wanted to do first, and what I thought would be a great idea here, is to just sort of show you and go over what I think are some important steps that you should take if you're planning on doing this. So look, we're in March. And people are finally getting their boats out. If you're living up north, you might be pulling your boat out for the first time in months, and you get it out on the water and you're all happy, and then all of a sudden your engine goes into limp home mode, the protect mode, because the engine's overheated. And then you're like, well, gee, what happened? So of course, I think the first thing you're going to probably want to do is get up there and pull this plastic cover off, check your thermostat and make sure that it's functioning. And after you've tested it, you find it does work and it's not the thermostat. And then the next thing you're going to do is turn your attention to your water pump in your lower unit. Is it causing the problem? So you call your mechanic, and your mechanic says, yeah, we can help you, but we're three weeks to a month out. We're booked. We have no space for your boat at the yard. I've had that happen to me. So then you begin to get the idea, well, maybe I can do this job myself. But if you've never done it before, you're a little apprehensive, and I understand that. But I'm here to tell you that if I can do this job, just about anybody can do it. So before you really want to start, I think the easiest thing to do, and probably the smartest thing to do, is to make certain that you have a workstation set up, that you understand the tools that you're going to be needing to get that job done, and they're going to be right there at your disposal, so you don't have to go searching around and wasting time and what socket do I need, and so forth. I'm using my old little Black & Decker Workmate bench. It's a portable bench, very handy. It collapses down, you can store it in a corner. They're very inexpensive. I think they're still available. And then what I did in this case is I removed this center board, got it out of the way, and what's left is this perfect open center area, which is just ideal for being able to drop the gear case in and then rest the fins on here, and then you can kind of use the little levers to tighten it up, get it secure, so you have a good, level, secure place to work on your lower unit. So then the question is what kind of tools are you going to need to do this job? Well, the first thing I'm going to say you're going to have is a ball peen hammer. You're going to also want to have a chisel. I've got two here, and this will be necessary in order to be able to remove the Woodruff key off of the drive shaft. They're sometimes very stuck, and so you have to coax them out. Hammer, chisel, that's the way to go. You're also going to want to have a couple of channel lock pliers, a crescent wrench. This is what I use to try to tamp down the collar that goes over the spacer, which fits over the impeller. I'm going to get to all of that in a minute. I don't have the actual tool that is available for that job. I think Marine Tech Tool sells something more specific for it, but I found that you can also kind of get it done with a small or medium-sized crescent wrench. I have a pick that is helpful in removing the cotter pin off of the prop. I do recommend that you take the prop off of the boat. It lightens the weight about 10 pounds, plus in my particular space the propeller is too wide. You'd never be able to get it in here, so it's got to come off. Some good marine grease, this is an important component of all of this, and then some shop towels, as you can see, just to wipe things up. You're going to want a 14mm box wrench, a ratchet drive, 14mm socket, and a 12mm socket, and then an extension piece, which is going to be necessary for one of the bolts that have to come off. And that's All you basically are going to need to do this, maybe a flathead screwdriver as possible. You probably have that out here too. I didn't put one out, but it's always good to have that. All right, so let's move over to the lower unit. First thing you're going to see is your prop. All right, prop is going to be attached with this cotter pin and this castle nut, or prop nut as they call it. You want to use your channel locks, bend your cotter pin down straight. You can use that pick to kind of get in there and yank on it and pull on it, and eventually it'll probably come off. I also have a prop, a wrench, and one of those yellow things. You unscrew this, pull your prop right off, set that aside. Underneath all of that, of course, you want to check to see exactly, do you have any fishing line that might have gotten, kind of wrapped up around the shaft. And then also it's a good idea at that point in time to get some shop towels and wipe your shaft down really clean, get all the old grease off, check, make sure there's no damage to the splines. And then you're going to want to use your marine grease to put a good coating of grease back on those splines. All right, so now let's take a look at the lower unit itself. This is attached very firmly with 6 bolts. You can see 1, 2, 3 on the left-hand side, and then coming over to the right-hand side, make sure I got this in the shot. You should be able to see the other 1, 2, 3 here. Now, that's not all. There are 2 additional bolts, all right? The reason you need that long extension piece is because underneath this plastic cap, there's a bolt that's way down here, and it holds the sacrificial anode on, all right? So you're gonna have to get this plastic cap off. That flathead screwdriver is good for that. Insert your 12 millimeter socket down in here. You fish around with it, finally you'll get it. Crank it, this comes off in your hands. And then once this is off, what you're gonna find is there's another bolt in there, and that bolt is a long bolt, and it's gotta come out as well. So once you get them out, your lower unit, and all of these 6 bolts have been removed, your lower unit is ready to come off. So my suggestion is, the first thing to do, break all of these bolts free. Don't take them out, just break them free. The one you want to take out is the one that's got the sacrificial anode. Definitely remove that, because you have to be able to break this other one underneath here free. The only way to do that is with this being on. After you do that, what I've done is I kind of work in a crossing pattern. I'll remove this bolt first, and then come back and remove this bolt, all right? And then do the same thing on the other side. The first bolt down here, and then the last bolt, leaving the 2 ones in the center. Then take those off, and then the last bolt is this one in the back. Is that the right way to go? I don't know. It's the way I did it. It's the way I've done it on the other engine when I had to change the water pump over there 3 years ago. So, you can judge for yourself, but I found it effective and it works. Okay. So now, depending upon how long your lower unit has been attached to the rest of the engine, and whether you're involved in, boating in a very corrosive environment, where I live in the northern Gulf, we have a lot of fresh water that's off the Mississippi River, so we don't have that same type of high salinity that you're going to get, somewhere if you're in Isla Medora or in the Keys or Key Largo or something, down in South Florida. You're going to have a lot more corrosion issues probably than we would see here. The point being is that the lower might be a little bit stuck. And so the idea at that point is you're just going to kind of have to manhandle it a little bit. Do not, under any circumstances, insert a screwdriver somewhere in here trying to break that free. You don't want to mar up the metal. Generally speaking, if it's really stuck, use a rubber mallet maybe to knock on it. But normally, what you just have to do is sort of just jiggle it, pull it, jiggle it, and then eventually it's just going to come out, all right? And once that happens, you can put it down on your workstation, and you are ready to go to work at that particular point in time. So let me turn this camera off for a real quick second. I'm going to get it set up in another location because I want to go over the elements and the parts of the water pump itself so that you understand fully what it is that you're going to see and what you're going to be dealing with. All right, be back. Okay, so one of the things I didn't mention just a few minutes ago, latex gloves. You want latex gloves, they're good to have. They keep your hands clean and also sort of protect your skin in case of nicks or abrasions, cuts, and things along those lines. What you have here in front of you is the entire water pump for a Yamaha F150. All the components. So in my case, I do a complete rebuild. I order the Yamaha kit, that is the complete water pump rebuild kit. Now you don't have to do that. Some of these parts are reusable, some are not. The rubber gaskets are not reusable, okay? The wave washer assembly is. The impeller is something you're going after. This is really what you're going after to get rid of and to change. Obviously that's not going to be reusable. This gasket, not reusable, okay? But my theory and my belief on this is if I'm going to take the time to get into this engine and tear this thing down and remove it and go through all that trouble, I'm not gambling on whether any parts are good or bad or whether it may look good visually, but a month and a half or 2 months later it fails and now I'm tearing this thing down the second time. So just spend the extra money if you can. That's what that's my philosophy. Just spend the extra money up front, get the whole kit, redo the whole thing. And what you have here is all the parts that came off my right-hand engine just the other day when I did this job. These are the used parts. So what you have is the water pump housing. This is the main part of the water pump, and most of these things are all going to fit inside of this, okay? Aside from that, the next thing you have is an insert cartridge that goes inside of here. I'm going to get to that in a minute, all right? And then you have a black seal and a white plastic cover that are going to fit in here as well, okay? Then you have 2 rubber O-rings that go into it, all right? Then you're going to have an outer plate gasket, which is this, and then you're going to have the outer plate cartridge. I'm actually reading off of my cheat sheet because Yamaha has specific names for these parts, and I want to make certain I'm naming them according to how you would see them in the Yamaha manual or on their online schematics. I would personally call this a thrust plate, but they call it an outer plate cartridge, okay? The next thing you have here is a wave washer assembly. This basically is 3 washers, 2 of which are flat, completely flat washers. But the wave washer, and I don't know if you can kind of see it, it's like curvy, and that's why they call it a wave. It kind of looks like a little wave. The wave washer goes in between the 2 other washers. So you have 1 flat washer on the bottom and 1 flat washer on top with the wave washer in the middle, okay? The next thing is the Woodruff key. This is the little key that is a very, very important part. It fits inside this little insert slot on the drive shaft itself, and it's this is the little bugger that can be difficult to get out, and it can be equally difficult to get back in, but it's important that you get this part right, okay? Because what's going to happen here is that the impeller needs this Woodruff key. When you replace the impeller, I don't know if you can see it, but right here there's a little ridge, a little indentation in the actual shaft in the impeller itself, and that is going to slide over the portion of the Woodruff key that is still protruding out from the insert slot on the drive shaft, and you want to make sure you get that aligned properly, okay? Then what you have is the plastic spacer. It's got a little, you can open it a little bit so that slips over the drive shaft, and then the metal collar that's ultimately going to go, actually the spacer goes down this way, and the metal collar is going to come over it. And this is what I was using the crescent wrench to tamp down to get it seated into place. After that, it's simply the 4 mounting bolts, and then the rebuild kit comes with these 2 steel dowels. The dowels fit right where here on that hole and this hole to help lock your gasket and your outer plate cartridge in place, and then the 4 bolts all goes through it. All right, so let's take a look at putting all this together. All right, so the first thing is the other part about this marine grease that's very important. You want to take your housing and you want to take some good marine grease on your fingers and just start working it in here and getting a good little thin layer of grease covering all of this. You want to get it all around the outside of this as well. Part of the reason is because it can act like an adhesive to make certain that your little rubber gaskets fit into place and stay there, because at the end of the day what you're going to wind up doing is turning this whole thing upside down, and you don't want your gaskets falling out, all right? Now the good news on the small one that fits inside of this little slot here, okay, is that eventually, or not eventually, but we can do it right now, this insert cartridge is going to come in and fit in here. Now this only goes in one specific way. They have little indentations, and there it is, okay? It just fell into place, fits flush. The other rubber O-ring is going to fit now around the outer side of this, and you can see hopefully how it kind of goes in and fits like that. So a little layer of grease, marine grease, will act like a glue to sort of hold that into place, okay? The other components of it is the rubber seal goes in here. This is where the water pickup tube is going to ultimately be connected. This hole is where the drive shaft is going to come through. And then the plastic cap, which just snaps in like that, and that's in. All right, so this is basically the portion of the water pump that's ready to go back on the boat, okay? So what you're going to wind up doing at this point is, after you've inspected the bare metal that's underneath where all of this was that came off of, cleaning up any crud or grime or debris or anything, you know, that looks unseemly or would be in the way. Make sure you have a clean surface to put all this back on. You're going to take, the first thing that's going to go on is you're going to take your gasket, and you're going to go over the drive shaft down onto the place where it fits, and then the insert cartridge is going to, the same way, it's going to go the same way, and it's going to fit in there just like that, okay? Good. So the next thing that's going to go on is going to be your impeller, your Woodruff key. You're going to put your Woodruff key back in, okay? So to do this, what I suggest is to take a little bit of that grease and put just a small amount of grease in the insert slot that's on the drive shaft itself. And this is where you're going to need those channel lock pliers, okay? So what you want to do is you want to try to take your channel lock pliers and squeeze this half moon side, okay, into that slot, get it squeezed in. It can be real slippery and a little bit difficult, you know, you might have to, you know, make a couple of shots at it, but once you get it in and squeezed in as tight as you can with your channel locks, it's still going to be protruding a bit too far. And then that's what the ball peen hammer comes in handy for. I suggest that you put a little shop towel or something around the thrust plate or the insert cartridge so that you don't scratch it up when you're hitting it, but you're going to want to hammer it in with your ball peen until it's fully seated. Now that's going to leave a little bit of this Woodruff key exposed, and that's the part when you put the impeller on it that you can line up the impeller, that ridge inside the impeller right here, with that part of the Woodruff key, and that's going to help lock it into place, okay? Then the next group that's coming on this is your wave washer assembly. That's your two flat washers and your wave washer in the center over the drive shaft. That's going to drop down right on top of this impeller like this, just like that, okay? The next thing is going to be your plastic spacer with the ridge side down. There's a little lip. You want that down. That's going to come over the drive shaft, and that's going to fit right over here, okay? And then the metal collar, same thing, and it's going to come down over the drive shaft, and it's going to come on top of your plastic spacer. And then this is the point where you're going to need either that Marine Tech tool, which looks like a little U-shaped steel device, or I find that the crescent wrench trick works just as well. And then you're going to hammer it around and around and around and around till you have it fully seated. Now, the way I suggest you check that is by taking your hand and cranking the drive shaft in a clockwise direction while you're looking down here, and you can see if, you know, if one part of it is seated further down than another part. You want to make some little adjustments on it so that you got that seated down correctly, okay? So once that part of it is done, then you're ready to insert your assembled water pump housing, okay? This is going to go with the drive shaft, and the water pump pickup tube is facing the back of the lower unit. You put this on over the drive shaft, drop it down on here, okay? So this is the part where what you'll do is with one hand you're going to hold on to this like I've got like here. The other hand you've got the drive shaft, and you're going to crank the drive shaft in a clockwise direction, and at the same time you're doing that, you're pressing down firmly on this. And what's going to happen now is that the impeller blades are going to start to bend in that clockwise direction, and that's what you want, okay? And it's going to snap into place, and it's going to fit inside of this insert cartridge, okay? Once that happens, do not let the pressure up off of the water pump housing. Keep your pressure on. Then you're going to take your bolts, which you have already previously put some marine grade grease around on the threads, okay? That's important. Make sure you do that, okay? It's a preventative for corrosion and makes life a lot easier in the future if you ever have to remove these. I don't know if, you might be aware, you look at this and you think this is some kind of stainless steel bolt or something. It's not. It's an alloy, okay? It's very hard, but it also has somewhat of a brittleness to it. So if you get corrosion and you get something bound up on one of these bolts, or any of these bolts on this engine, I can tell you it is a bear to drill this thing out and get it out. I mean, it can cause you misery. I broke a bolt on my water pump thermostat about 4 years ago, and it took me 3 days to get this resolved, okay? Not something that you want to do. So that's why it's important to just put a little thin bead of good marine grease on all of these bolts, and you just simply go while you've got your hand down on there, right? I digressed a little. Put them in. Crank them tight. You can thread them with your fingers and get them threaded in just hand tight. That should itself do the job, okay? And then after you've done that, the rest of it is just simply tightening them down with your wrench. And once you have accomplished that, you have a rebuilt water pump system. So the next thing is going to be, of course, getting your lower unit back into your engine. And it's simply, sort of a reverse of taking it out. You have to be careful. There are some things in here that you'll notice. There's going to be the main drive shaft. There's going to be the shift shaft. The drive shaft is long. It comes out of the power head all the way down to the gear case, all right? The shift shaft is about 10 inches long or so. It's going to connect into the shifting mechanism. And then at the very front of the lower unit, once it's out, there's a little plastic pickup tube for water. It's a speedometer thing. It's about maybe 2 inches long. It's plastic. It's not steel, all right? Easy to break that off. So when you're putting your lower unit in, make sure you're very careful about your alignment. The lower unit can only go back into the boat one way, all right? It's not subject to play because this thing is picking up that water pickup tube in there, right? So, it's all got to fit, and don't force it. It's going to go in on its own. You just keep looking, keep working. It may be helpful to have a second pair of hands to help because this thing gets heavy. Gravity is working against you. And then once you do that, you start taking your bolts, which you've also put grease on your main bolts as well, okay? And you start trying to get them tightened back in. Once you get maybe 2 bolts on here, 1 on each side, you're good, all right? Then you can start just putting them back in and torquing them down and getting them tight. So that is basically the size of it. It's not a hard job to do. I'm going to end this video at this stage, and then I will pick up a part 2 of my teardown on the lower unit. It was this motor here on the left-hand side is the one I actually had filmed, and I'm going to have to do some edits to try to make this thing work out so that it can all be sort of digested in a fairly short period of time. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Don't be afraid of doing this job. If you've never done it, you want to save yourself some money, you want to save those mechanics fees. Those guys are expensive by the hour. You can order the parts, directly from a place like simyamaha.com. They're an awesome group of people up in Michigan that have basically every range of Yamaha part that you could possibly want. And that is my go-to source for all of these things. And this can be done. You can do this. So if you like what you've seen, or you have any questions, or if something wasn't clear, leave some notes in the comment, make some comments below, and I will certainly try to get some answers for you. So good luck, and thanks for watching. We'll be back.